Hello and welcome to the Business and AI Forum. We have the keynote presentation for today, where we're going to talk about how business and business functions are being impacted by AI technologies. In particular, in this presentation, we're going to talk about data sovereignty and how to leverage data products as a key asset on the balance sheet. There are many dimensions that we're going to tackle here, but I'd love to introduce Alex Rodriguez, the founder of the Data Freedom Foundation, as well as Derek Strauss, the president CEO of Gavroshe. And I'd love to give you guys a moment to give a little bit about your background, where you are, and where you're seeking to go with this presentation.
Great, thanks, Joaquin. Let me jump in. I'm Derek Strauss, and glad to have the opportunity to chat about such an important area that has received a lot of attention, but there's been a lot of spectacular failures along the way. And we feel really excited because we're really on the cusp of something breakthrough here. The whole issue down through the last 4 decades or so of data management has been about data as an asset. People have talked about the fact that your organization has assets. It has your human resources are assets, your money is assets, and this whole idea that data is an asset. Now, if it's really an asset, how are we gonna work with it? What does that mean? What are the implications? And who owns it? And who controls it? And how do we keep it secure? And all of these types of things. And how do we trust it? Do we know that the data is actually good? Who's messed with it? We might have received it in good order, and we've messed it up internally. And we've literally struggled with figuring out how to resolve that, over the last several decades now. And part of the problem has been that, we haven't been able to figure out how to make data and its metadata, in other words, all the rules around the data, live together and move together all over the place. So we want to share some of those interesting concepts about bringing ownership, security, trust, and control together. A bit about my background is I've been in data and analytics, all my professional career, and for the last four decades, basically, I've had a consulting organization that is focused on these really important matters. The company's name is Gavroshe, and we have operated on 3 different continents, and typically the way that we work is long-term engagements with our customers, anything from 18 months to 4 to 5 years, where we work and help organizations to change the culture. And when we talk about changing the culture, literally we're talking about helping the organization to make it a data-driven organization, a company that recognizes data as an asset, treats it as an asset, and is able to, maximize value, business value from it. So that's a little bit about me. Now over to you, Alan.
Thank you, Derek. Yeah, I'm Alan. It's a little about me. I've been working with Derek now for about a decade. I had the honor of joining him at TD Ameritrade when he was the chief data officer. And I had a history repeatedly of working on systems from the early days of the internet that were, interestingly, the common theme across all of them was that they were multi-party, multi-step kind of transaction systems. So from the early days of the internet, back when PayPal was just emerging and doing things on eBay, I was working on the first generation payment systems at Chase Payment Tech, and figuring out how to integrate data across all these different credit card processing systems and websites. And then from there, I went to and helped launch the first global digital supply chain platform. And I, in particular, ended up being responsible for all the data integration and interoperability for that platform. And that's now part of SAP Ariba. And then I had an opportunity to work in marketing. Digital marketing around this time was being kind of custom built. CAN-SPAM was coming on board. The first kind of digital regulations were coming online, and had a chance to work with digital consultancy, building what now looking back, really we would call these data clean rooms. We took in all the data from companies like PepsiCo and AT&T and American Airlines. And we made sure that hundreds of agencies could use it and integrate with it, that we could conduct experiments with it, integrate external data with it, and do it in a compliant way. And after that, that's when I had a chance to work with Derek at TD Ameritrade. And my background's product management. But again, I've been working on these as a product manager, managing these multi-party data transaction kinds of systems, often at the center of the data integration of these systems and dealing with all the challenges that are a part of making that happen. And so I went in and I had an opportunity to work with Derek for a good half a decade or so at TD Ameritrade under like a product management role, kind of pioneering the idea of data products. This idea that we can take data as we're preparing it for use cases and prepare it to be reused. And we'll get into this in more detail as we go into the session. But I'm amongst a lot of data professionals that I deeply respect, that in many ways understand these domains better than me. But I've been looking at this from the lens of a product person, and how can we productize this and not just figure out the technology. I'd say over the last decade, maybe 2 to 3 years of that has been the technology. Easily 3/4 of it has been the go-to-market. How do we bring these kinds of solutions to life in the world? And so since our tenure at TD Ameritrade, I've had a chance to work either at or with a number of data governance organizations and other organizations that have been working on what we call trust envelopes. It's kind of an umbrella term. And I was a chief data officer for one of the security envelopes, a media security envelope company called Here. And they're kind of a foundational partner of ours. And over the course of the last 4 years, I've had a chance to work with so many of these different trust envelope companies that I guess in some ways I've become sort of the foremost expert on this. Seems kind of tricky for me to say that. But yeah, I've been trying to see how these different trust envelopes could be used together. So the news here is that these trust envelopes allow us to, for the first time, own, secure, control, and monetize our data and knowledge. And I'll get into exactly how they work, but it's because we have, well, I'll get into it and how we work in a minute. But yeah, so that's the story. It feels trippy that I'm the one telling everyone this, but really we've been working on not just how to productize data, but how to actually implement that productization in an automated way. So how do we do this? When we're going through this data productization process, the data product owner is particularly worried about who, where, when, and how others use the data. In some cases, we're seeing people organize data into spreadsheets and just putting on the spreadsheet like the rules for how it can be used. HIPAA says this, and GDPR says this, and there's no actual control of it. And so as we looked at these different trust envelopes, what we realized was that we could begin to solve these problems. Some envelopes control for who, some for where, some for when, and some for how.
Yeah, quick question. Why is this important? Why do we need that, the smart data protocol?
Because without it, we're not going to be able to assert ownership or, okay, so what I think we've stumbled into is the idea that if we try and address for ownership and security and for monetization and control, trust, quality, if we try and solve for these things individually, as I think many different experts do, we're only going to make incremental improvements. But what we noticed when we started working with these trust envelopes, we noticed that we could solve for all of them in an integrated way, a more holistic way. And in many ways, what that showed us was that you really can't solve any of them without solving maybe all of them simultaneously.
Yeah, I think that's, maybe I can just add to that, is that there've been a lots of experimentation trying to solve each of these things individually. And while they've been maybe successful, you know, at addressing little pieces of the puzzle, because everything else wasn't addressed simultaneously, you know, it just didn't bring it home. We just didn't get across the finish line. And so this integrated approach is really the key. It's not that there hasn't been any work done. I mean, there's been some great work, some excellent products, etc., that have been built, but they've been very focused, and because of that, you know, it's presented a fragmented solution, which at the end of the day just hasn't been able to live up to supporting a culture change in the organization from, you know, a culture that really doesn't care about its data to becoming a culture that does care about its data. And as we move into the world of artificial intelligence, people are discovering that, you know, instead of what some of the vendors initially were saying, you know, hey, we're entering the world of AI now, so you don't have to worry so much about your data. The complete opposite is true. People are starting to realize that, hey, even more so, as we step into AI, we've got to make sure that we know where all our data is and how, you know, if it's fit for purpose, and can we use it? You know, is it ours? Can we control it? Can we trust it? All of those kinds of things are starting to come to the fore together. And so it's no longer a case of, oh, we're doing AI, therefore, you know, can we trust it? And that's all that we're thinking about. No, it's like, who owns it? Is it secure, etc.? All of those are playing together, and, you know, coming together in like the perfect storm. And so the whole idea of the Smart Data Protocol is to create that integration around those four aspects.
Yeah, thank you, Derek. There we go. Thank you, Joaquin. So, you know, what we're trying to, I guess, say here is that there's this category of technology that I think has been running under the radar, that people are now referring to this as trust envelopes. We have of the different technology contributors that we're collaborating with, and we're collaborating with at least one on each of these layers around semantics and meaning, around ownership, around trust and integrity and security and control. And they're all, we're sort of, as we collaborate, as I work with all these companies on their individual parts, it didn't come from me. Everyone else sort of came up with this umbrella term of a trust envelope. And what we're saying here is that, you know, one group, the Solid Protocol, they've invented this idea of an ownership trust envelope that powers personalization. There's another group, the TOTA protocol, that is like a blockchain inside the asset. It's an immutable ledger. It provides integrity, and it's trusted sufficiently that it's used for micropayments as we speak with Canadian and UK banks. And then we have a multitude of security envelopes that let us control sort of who, when, and where the data is used. This time last year, we had one group that had that. And as of today, we have 3, right? And our big invention, as we were sort of working with all these different contributors, each one different startups, we realized that we could put, we could make the whole thing, we could combine them and make it programmable. So what we're describing when we sort of add all this up is this idea that there's this category of technology called trust envelopes that many people don't know really exists. We have a lot of different companies working on different aspects of what the trust envelopes can do. Individually, they can give sort of the data self-awareness. The security, one of the security envelope providers can run an NIST scan, for instance. Oops. My notes. So the idea is that we can put software in it. So the big epiphany here when we were working at C here and I began collaborating with the other trust envelope companies was we were designing the different ways that how we could build solutions. And at some point you get into the user experience part where people are dragging around these different assets. And we realized, well, we could put them inside one another. We could literally put a zip file with a password sort of inside a zip file with a password, inside a zip file with a password, inside of zip. We weren't going to stop anyone from doing it. And then we realized you could put software in it, like the NIST scan or the location awareness software. And we realized we can't stop that either. And then we had a pause where we were all like kind of a little tripped out, like what kind of monster are we creating? Honestly, right? Like what kind of technology is a mess enough? Are we really? What is this monster, right? And so, but we'll get into the use cases of how these things work. But that's at its essence. It's that these trust envelopes exist. They are inspired from a decade or so more of standards efforts as early as 1997 with the Platform for Privacy Preferences. We then moved into the 2000s and we began, this is out of Europe, Porsche. This Platform for Privacy Preferences effort ended in 2006 and spun up the Policy Aware Web. And that lasted for a little while, and then it turned into the Policy Languages Interest Group, and this is where a lot of work around ontologies and semantics and the semantic web emerged. Over here on the right, we have this Transparent Accountable Data Mining Initiative that began in 2006 and then ended in 2011. You'll notice many of these ended in 2011. That's a whole story. And when we talk about Data Freedom Foundation being set up in this sort of special way, that special way that we're describing is designed to solve for that problem. That every one of these standards bodies globally across multiple universities and multiple nations were all defunded and shut down simultaneously. But if we can't really dig into the picture, but we have a whole section up here about ontologies and policies and contracts. We have the law, GDPR. We have control of all the data on the web. We have this thing called a proof-capable reasoner. We now call these zero-knowledge proofs. Back in 2011, I was reading about this ability to ask questions of data and get an answer. That's called a zero-knowledge proof. That tripped me out. These are cryptographers and mathematicians working on this stuff, really smart people. But this is what they were thinking. We could ask a question of data, prove you're an adult, not reveal your birthday. Prove your income clears a certain level without revealing your income. Prove any number of things without revealing the underlying data. This is now the backbone to how blockchains work. Proof of work and proof of stake are different kinds of zero-knowledge proofs. We have the ability for auditors to look at to explain the output of the proof and to do an automated reasoner and an explanation. We have analysts looking at the intended or appropriate reasoner for appropriate use. This is a model for automating GDPR. And all the parts to what we're doing are essentially here. And then to even go further, around the same time out of Canada, we have the ENCORI project. This is ensuring consent and revocation. So this is the first group that actually came up with the idea of a trust envelope, because they realized the only way to revoke consent, to press a button and take the data back, was to encapsulate it in something that could control it. They called this a sticky policy, but this is the beginnings of the thinking here. So, this is there's a whole story around why we are where we are, why these standards were defunded, and why really no one knows about it. Thank you, Joaquin. So moving on. So each of these different companies' interest envelopes is deserving of its own hour-long conversation, right? So, you know, the part of the meaning or the semantic part is to ensure data comprehension and interoperability. Yeah, and then the solid part is ownership. This is interesting because it own data is permanently connected to its creator. The TOTA protocol. Let me take a moment and dig into that for a moment. This is the sort of the most kind of trippiest part of the different envelopes. If we think about how blockchains work, they are basically an immutable ledger. A group of people have decided they're going to follow some standard of how the software works, and it's going to record a set of events on a chain. It's immutable, it's censor proof, right? You can't edit the audit log. That uses a certain kind of cryptography, and that's that. But it's not the only kind of distributed ledger. The TOTA protocol is also a distributed ledger. It's in many ways it's like the opposite of Bitcoin. It's more like digital cash. The immutable ledger is recorded inside the asset itself, inside a file. And so there are banks in Canada and the UK today that you can take a TOTA asset as if it's cash, and you can submit it through their validator and confirm that its validity, that it in fact came from a certain issuer, and a certain issuer has title to it. So the cryptographic history that's being recorded inside the TOTA file is a way to, in essence, record all the history of enterprise data at a fixed price. Nowhere else in the crypto space do we see this possibility. That certainty around the fixed price is the part that traditional blockchains struggle with. But the TOTA protocol, because it's peer-to-peer, it's decentralized in the sense that there are no intermediaries. We're moving around these assets that record their history, and they're individually validated. So they're sort of like a digital bearer asset, if you understand what a digital bearer asset is. And it is working. It's operational today. You can go to there's a few Canadian and UK banks that are implementing it. There are people who are ditching their credit card processors to use this as we speak. It's about a 90% reduction in payment processing costs. In fact, you're transacting without a middleman. I'm sorry, an intermediary. And so when we talk about just the ability to create data clean rooms without an intermediary, it's this underlying TOTA protocol that's allowing that to happen. It's foundational. If we didn't have it, we couldn't really do what we're describing when we get into the data clean room use case. Thank you, Joaquin. Derek, do you want to talk about the roadmap?
Yeah. So what we realized is that again, the kind of the holy grail that everyone's been trying to get at, which I mentioned earlier on, is data as an asset. What does that actually mean? Ultimately, it means, you know, that we should be able to see it on the balance sheet of the organization. But we've realized that we've never been able to just flick a switch and make that happen. We've tried a lot of different ideas. People have written books on this. A lot of it's been relegated to theory because we haven't really approached it in a holistic fashion, and we haven't had an integrated solution in order to be able to, you know, ensure that we have longevity of these assets and that they are truly assets. So people have been able to shoot holes in you know, a lot of our you know, efforts over the years to try and create this kind of culture. And so what we found is that certainly we've got to address all four of those aspects that we introduced earlier on, but we've also got to do it in phases. And the way we have seen this work successfully is is it in a three-phase kind of approach. The first phase is all about just being able to observe the data and understand where it is, who's touching it, where did it come from, what are the rules related to it, is the quality correct, can it be trusted, etc., etc. So being able to just observe it and get answers to those kinds of questions has been something that has eluded people. The best that people have been able to do as far as observability historically is to understand what we've really called the voice of process, which is kind of a software picture. It basically says that this data has gone through this process at this time, and these rules are applied to it, and this is the results of that as it was moving to the next stage of its journey through the organization. That was a voice of process. What has eluded us is the voice of data. How to ensure that the data itself speaks to us and says, yeah, process is interesting, and it's cool to be able to understand the process and the journey through the organization, but really we want to see the voice of data telling us exactly what happened to that data, and how it's been changed as it moves through the organization. So that just about every vendor out there is now really cottoning on to this, and just about every vendor out there is talking about observability. Now there are various flavors of it that are being presented. We're really trying to look at something that is all-encompassing, and we'll deal with that in a little bit more detail in subsequent slides here. But that's the first most critical step in this journey. And for an organization to really wrap their arms around this, and to make the kinds of changes to the culture so that this becomes a cornerstone, we're saying that certainly you can take small chunks and small groupings of data, some of your critical data elements in certain areas, and start doing good observability in the short to medium term. But to really get a big chunk of the organization to where it really beds down and becomes part of the culture, it's going to take a number of years to really get to a point where this is how things are done, and the culture has changed. The second phase goes into the data clean room area, and the ability to have trusted multi-party micropayments and proof of provenance. Alan has kind of introduced that a little bit in terms of some of the stuff that he's described already, and we're going to dive a bit deeper into that as well. But once we've got phase 1 and phase 2 in place, then we're ready to really dive into the digital assets on the balance sheet situation, which again is the holy grail that we're shooting for. I'll come back and talk a little bit more about phase 3 a little bit later on, but Alan's going to pick up now on a more detailed view of some of these phases.
Thank you, Derek. Sorry, excuse me. So what we're looking at here on this slide without a title is the existing sort of state of the enterprise with regard to data products. This is an example of an organization without them, right? And so what happens when we well, let me back up. I know we have tech professionals here, but let me start by just saying what a data product is. Data products deliver a high value, ready to use set of data that people across an organization and I'm going to extend that to between organizations in a moment, can easily access and apply to different business challenges. So what we're trying to do here is we're trying to take these use cases where we prepare data. Right now, in a less mature data management organization, these data assets will be handled, they'll be extracted kind of one-off. And what we're trying to do is again, package them within some sort of known quantity, or some known quality, known integrity, to be reused to create efficiencies. An example for this might be like a 360 view of customers, including all the details of customers' business units and systems collected about them. It could be online, or, well, I'm getting ahead actually. Let me explain this, and then I'll give into examples of data products. But this is a case where they don't exist, right? And so what we end up with is data pipelines that are redundant, fragmented, and not reusable, with some inconsistent data quality. I can't read behind the slide. Yeah, formatting, meaning, and kind of poor interoperability. It results in systems that are isolated and data that's siloed. And the real killer is every time we add more of these use cases, when you look at this slide and you think about what it must be like to be a chief data officer, they're constantly being bombarded with people in the business that want new use cases fulfilled. There's often people that have funded companies that have an application for that use case. And then we're spinning up more extracted data sets. And so we have this sort of compounding effect of complexity and cost and risk. And this is sort of a traditional view of data products kind of in the current state without them. But I added another problem to this slide, and that's that we have the same internal problems we have coming in from outside the organization and going out. So in a moment, we're going to fix this, but we're going to do it in 2 steps. The first step is just getting to this world where we have data products, where we have these reusable data assets that can be reused across use cases, where the data becomes consistent, some kind of consistent quality, meaning, and formatting, and it results in significant cost efficiencies and lowered risks. And in many ways, the data becomes much more interoperable and compliant, but only within the organization, and it doesn't really do anything for data passing between the different applications. What's so impressive about this is that the companies that have been doing this for the last, say, 5 to 6 or 7 years, where they can measure the ROI, that what we've found is that treating data like a product reduces the time it takes to implement new use cases by as much as 90%. And the total cost of ownership of the whole data architecture, that's the technology, the development and maintenance costs, can go down as much as 30%. So we have significant efficiencies and reduced risks and a reduced data governance burden. Obviously, this takes a bit of jump starting to get going. It takes more time to create these reusable data products, but as Derek has said, I think he said earlier, from a management standpoint, if we can identify these critical data elements and you spin these through this process first, this really can be an orderly process. That begins to sort of gain efficiencies and build efficiencies as you continue. But again, even though this is being done today, it doesn't do much across organizations. It's not doing much to help data coming in. It's not doing much to help data going out for the people downstream, nor cases where the data comes back, which it does often. So that is where we are saying, when we use these trust envelopes and we now have some level of ownership and security and control and quality and transparency, observability, and trust, that we finish out sort of this productization picture. Now the systems and data are interoperable and compliant. Data can now move sideways. The data coming in and out can now be more interoperable with upstream and downstream systems. And we don't know yet what kind of efficiencies this can create, but we think it will improve upon this significantly, especially as we look into a world where we have more and more interorganizational kind of transactional opportunities. without belaboring how many there are and the different kinds. But yeah,
The evolution of this concept that you're showcasing here, to me, it invokes the idea that language evolved the development of accounting, and accounting eventually evolved to be interoperable within different organizations through the generally accepted accounting principles. So, to me, this is the data equivalent of that. Data systems led to data databases. Databases led to paradigms, patterns in how to keep track of transaction systems of records. Eventually, you grew your business to a way where you needed to capture different kinds of transactions through different lines of business. And now we're looking at how do you create an interoperable ecosystem where you can seamlessly translate the transactions between not only parties within your organization, but outside of your organization to governments or other players that are in the same industry or that that same kind of ecosystem. Very interesting.
yes, yes,
Yeah.
it's sorry, Derek. Okay.
No, I was just going to say, well stated. I think those are great analogies. Yeah.
Yeah. It's I'm about to dive into the use case in a moment. And I just want to sit here for a moment and see if I've forgotten anything.
No, I think you've got it.
Yeah. Yeah, and we've been on the front lines of these data organizations, and we know what we're proposing is significant. We know that we're proposing something that's a 5-year kind of an architectural evolution. We know we're proposing standards that are going to be potentially very important in many people's lives, and we put a lot of thought into the organization that we need to build to make sure that the human interest is not sidelined to the profit interest. That what intrigues us about this architecture when we start looking at these trust envelopes is how we can't uninvent them. We can't uninvent how we've learned how to put them together. And when you put them together, this is the result. The result is it eradicates many intermediaries, both banking intermediaries, the way blockchain does. That's the Total protocol is doing. And then in our case, data intermediaries, when we add the other kinds of trust envelopes to the integrity of the Total envelopes. You can't uninvent any of that. So let's go into the data clean room. Thank you, Joaquin. So this is a report from the Interactive Advertising Bureau about data clean room challenges. This is the leading sort of organization, at least on the retail and marketing side of things, the advertising side of things around data clean rooms. There's different groups working in different industries. This one is advertising and marketing related. The key points from this, 5 sort of their conclusion from their report is that data interoperability remains a significant problem with data clean rooms. They say it's incumbent upon all data providers, including walled gardens, that's their polite term, walled gardens, to make their data interoperable so advertisers can measure full campaign effectiveness and ROI. So this is one of many examples we run into when we're looking at data interoperability. But in this case, what is being said is that if we don't make the data interoperable, we can't measure campaign effectiveness and ROI. That's in their words. The consequence of this is that the investments are high, and they create a high barrier to entry, which puts small industry players, including agencies, brands, and publishers, at a disadvantage. Surprise, surprise. Although data clean rooms provide, innovative and essential privacy-preserving services, they're not turnkey technologies. I know, having built an early one, mostly around email compliance prior to GDPR, these are not turnkey solutions. We had to go through building a dozen of them before we got close to having something that was a product. They require significant investment in talent, financial resources, and setup, in data infrastructure, in connectivity, as well as onboarding of their people. In many cases, we're hearing that these things are totally manual, which should frighten people. And so what we're about to describe for everyone is the unavoidable truth that when we look at these different trust envelopes, we can now construct a peer-to-peer data clean room without intermediaries. So this is this. I'll go through this in all the various parts, the various steps. This is kind of an example of what we're thinking the user experience is going to look like when as a standard matures. This kind of multi-party, multi-step process, and kind of a graphical designer so that non-programmers can build multi-party, multi-step compliant data processes and sort of be unleashed. You know, the enterprise, their innovation can sort of be unbound. They can be allowed to sort of innovate and try these different configurations, knowing that because of the combinations of trust envelopes and the way they're configured, that the data is compliant, secure, private, etc. In this case, we actually took the time to map out different kinds of clean rooms, and we've taken the time to begin to study all the different use cases of all the clean rooms. And we've taken the time to notice that there's some repeating themes. And so we're going to take one of the simpler use cases. I'm going to walk you guys through a marketing example where we're doing an ad ROI sort of analysis. We're doing, in this case, we're doing a segmentation analysis, okay? So in some of the more complex marketing scenarios, we have a product manufacturer. Let's just say that that's Pepsi. In many ways, they're part of the reasons why we're all here, because of the work I did with them. And Pepsi may have an ad campaign with, say, a retailer. Let's say this is Walmart. And they might place an ad on, let's say, CNN. And they might be using an ad platform like Google, right? So PepsiCo has no idea who's buying their products. It's very challenging for them to optimize their ROI. They require a lot of data from other third parties to round out their view of the customer. And so in this case, what they would do is they would package up their input data, whatever that might be. It might be everything that they know about the customers. It's segmentation analysis. So it could be everything they've aggregated on the customer. They might conduct some kind of privacy preserving activities on it. They might do a synthetic output. They might, probably not a segment. And they would share it with their other partners. The other partners would then receive it and they would add their data. And they would also set rules on how their data is used and send it back to PepsiCo. And what's happening here is everyone knows what everyone's doing. Everyone can see what's happening. The data has constraints on it. So like where PepsiCo would have shared it with, say, Walmart and Google and CNN, the data, for instance, might be constrained so it only works on their network. If this data asset leaves the retailer, it's inaccessible. It can even notify PepsiCo and let them know. Interestingly, because we haven't gone into all the different trust envelopes, it can self-destruct, and it can even reveal incorrect information. So it's pretty trippy what each of the companies are doing with their individual envelopes. But so it gets sent to PepsiCo, and let's say PepsiCo then, I said earlier, we can nest them and we can put software in them. So in this case, PepsiCo gets, say, a k-means or some kind of hierarchical clustering, some sort of software mechanism that produces the output segment. They can put that in the envelope and run it and get their output. Now, let's say PepsiCo wants to send it off to an AI. Maybe they want to do a segmentation through an AI service. Well, the first thing that's going to happen is unless they go back to the other data trading partners and update their rules, because remember, they send it back to PepsiCo, it can only run on PepsiCo's network. If they send it out of the network, well, the AI service can't process it. So they have to go back to the data owners and say, hey, guys, we're going to do something else with the data. Adjust your rules. And then they send it back to PepsiCo, and PepsiCo can send it out, and now the AI service can make the segment. But this is kind of an example of how, if you've got a contract with someone around how your data relationship is going to work, these envelopes allow us to sort of enable what we want and very much like a scalpel, carve out what we do not want. and even have the visibility, the transparency, and the auditability to confirm that the things we didn't want have not happened, even with some mitigating, like defensive mitigating actions. I think. Oh yeah. Okay. So we have the segment now. All right. This is where it gets even wilder. So let's say PepsiCo checks the segment and they say, yeah, we've gone through QA, we're happy with it. So now PepsiCo can issue a delete command. Remember, the security envelopes have consent revocation. I probably take the X off of this one. But so it would be everywhere else where the data was distributed from its source, it would be deleted. And then when the data trading partners got their command to delete the PepsiCo data, they could issue their own deletes. So the whole data, all the data is ephemeral. It's like we took Snapchat and we just slapped it onto data, and it now goes everywhere. And then in the end, what we have is our QA checked segment report, and no data anywhere is now accessible. And no third party was used to conduct the transaction. And it was all done in a compliant, private, and secure way, with everyone understanding what each other has done. And it's all kind of inevitable when one looks at these trust envelopes and realizes that we can assemble them this way to do this.
So, in a nutshell, there's this way of creating a graphical user interface where you can construct your own data assets. You can govern or manage your data assets and share them with whichever parties you want to share them with, and make it as opaque or as transparent as you would like. And at any point, you can retrieve the access to this asset and make it inaccessible or destroy it.
Correct.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Right on.
Yep. So, basically, by focusing on all of those key components that we talked about earlier, when we said we've got to be able to address ownership, security, trust, and control, all four of them, we're now in a really solid foundation to be able to, say that our data, it's been productized, and it is an asset on our balance sheets. So we've all seen some really interesting examples. Probably one of the most interesting examples has been, since 2021, 2022, 2023, those years where people were looking at the hit that the airline industry had taken, and we're looking at the market cap of some of those companies, and then saying, wow, it's pretty low. But then the thing that was able to essentially save a lot of them was their loyalty programs. And essentially, if you look at companies like American Airlines, I mean, their frequent flyer or their loyalty program, the initial discussions were that it was like 20 to 30 billion, as something that they could put on their balance sheet. And that essentially was data. I think that made a lot of organizations sit up and pay attention. That, hey, our data really can be, something that can find its way onto the balance sheet, and in fact can save us in really tight situations that we can face, due to complete chaos that erupts on the world marketplace. So a lot of organizations are really now starting to put a lot more research and development into how they can ultimately reach this goal of digital assets on the balance sheet. And what we're saying is that we found a way. We found a way of doing that, and it's essentially taking a lot of the learnings that have come from some great work that has been done, but it's been fragmented. And essentially, we're saying just bring it all together. Bring it all together through the trusted envelope kind of architecture, and it's going to get us there. It's already starting to get a number of organizations down the right path. And I want to just emphasize that, you know, this roadmap that we showed is really all about productization, and the timeline that we've put on here is for, you know, a large organization to really fully make the culture change, you know, the 5-year kind of timeline. But that doesn't mean that it's only at the end of the 5 years that you're going to get value. Obviously, the kind of approach that we take is right up front in the first phase is to look for the critical data elements behind the critical processes in the organization where the real business value is going to be achieved in the short term, and go after those first and prove it, and then expand it, you know, so that you get a greater and greater coverage, a bigger footprint, you know, and ultimately cover all the most important critical data elements and turn those into, you know, digital assets on the balance sheet. So, you know, you're going to get value incrementally within the first year, but it's going to increase and increase and build on, and ultimately give you the complete culture change that you're looking for in the space of 3 to 5 years. So that's really the holy grail that we're shooting for.
What I appreciate about this roadmap and this timeline is that you both painted this very clear problem space where data clean rooms are a necessity for organizations that frequently deal with other organizations, but it is time consuming, it is expensive, it is a specialized skill set to develop these kinds of solutions. You guys are abstracting that with a set of essentially what I would call Lego blocks, with the modular interface to create the data envelopes. And not only are you making adoption easier, but you're making it easier with the more players that get involved with this as a standard, because they'll readily plug and play with each other. So the gain, the efficiency, the value can only grow as the network is adopted within a particular set of players in a particular industry, whichever that may be. And not to wax too much poetic, because I could be a little bit too esoteric, but what I see here is similar to how Sears began to gain popularity with the development of houses. Sears sold house kits, and that's what led to the development of carpenters to develop bigger and more ambitious houses, and that developed into the practice of architecture. So you guys are essentially selling the house kits, and the more people that adopt the house kits, the more that this is going to develop into its own architectural, or I don't even know what kind of professional name to put behind it, but I see this evolving into a different practice altogether.
Yeah, I think it's a great way of putting it, you know, and the key is the standards, you know, because everything's been so fragmented in the past, there's been no standard. Everyone's kind of done what they want to do, and then it's a nightmare to try and bring it all together. I think everyone, you know, all the vendors as well, you know, all the folks that have been experimenting with this, they see the need for a common standard now, a common approach. And they see that that's the way they're really going to solve problems for organizations, is the collaborative kind of model using a common standard. So yeah, I think it's a great way of thinking about it. Thank you. We're gonna use that one in the future. Sears.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't copyright it. Damn it. Okay.
Well,
this is an excellent pitch. I should have had a trusted envelope before I gave you guys the quote.
Right.
Yeah, there you go.
You know, you know you're onto something when you Google a word like digital envelope, and you get more responses back of physical envelopes than digital ones. That you're like, Maybe we're missing something here, right? And some of the references to these technologies go all the way back to before the internet.
Right.
Do we have time to go into AI?
Yeah, for sure.
Do we? I think that's a question that sort of answers itself, right? I think, yeah. Do we have time to go into AI? I think everyone's going to say yes to that. This is the last use case. My picture drawing kind of dried out this week. This is about allocated output. And in fact, I would redo this diagram. This was the first attempt at sort of capturing knowledge being repurposed for AI use cases. Let me explain it first, and then I'll tell you why I would change it in the next version. But this is very similar to the productization slide. In place of the applications, we're talking about smart data products containing specific things. In this case, we've identified these are specific things ways in which we want to reorganize data for use within AI use cases. And so it kind of acts as sort of a translation layer. These ways of structuring knowledge graphs, vector databases, and highly kind of curated data sets. These seem to be the ways, the dominant ways today to organize business knowledge over here, systems of record and knowledge repositories, and restructure it, if you will, in what, for lack of a better term, we could call it a database for AI use cases. And so what organizations are facing today with AI is the need to take, they need to de-risk all these AI use cases. Because of what? So just off the top of my head, we have the hallucination, we have the not anchoring it in truth, we have the inconsistency with how it can output things at times. And so when one tries to follow the AI space, the themes that emerge is that these are three dominant ways in which knowledge is being restructured so that we can deploy AI use cases and largely manage the risks, or begin to manage the risks. And so what's happening here is organizational kind of secret sauce, right? Like all the knowledge in the business is is captured in core processing systems. It's captured in unstructured data. It's captured in the data models and architectures. There's rules about how the business works that are built deep into the data models that only your data experts can read. It's called job security. We have the same thing going on in the software itself. All kinds of business knowledge embedded in the software requirements and rules of the software itself. We have, just any kind of knowledge store in the business. And I didn't keep going. So we have, I'm not finished with it. So there's lots of sources of knowledge, and we're trying to capture this. This is like secret sauce. Businesses, I think, haven't really understood how much knowledge they have about how their business model works and how they run it, because so much of it has been sort of captured in these different systems in people's heads, that it's hard to walk out of the business. It's not readily available. It's kind of hidden from everyone in some ways. But in order to de-risk the AI use cases, we're having to extract all that out and rebuild it in numerous ways. And so what we're proposing here is that if we use these trust envelopes in some kind of a standard, like the smart data protocol, like we're describing, that this organizational secret sauce that we're repurposing for AI use cases, we can now assert again that one owns it and is titled to it, that it is secured. If it's taken out of the business, it doesn't work, and you can be alerted. That it's controlled. You can revoke access to it. And that ultimately you can even monetize it. If these assets are of value to others, you now have a capacity to license it and generate revenue off of it. And then just to put the cherry on top, just to kind of go all the way over the cliff, what we're also saying is that as these assets are built, because they're expensive to build these things, what we're saying is let's build them in a way where the ROI of the AI use case is then used to capture them as an asset on the balance sheet. So the investment is worth the cost. This has been a huge hurdle in getting semantic work done within the traditional enterprise. I'm sure others can speak quite a bit to this, the opportunity of knowledge graphs and graph systems within the business, and the cost of building them, and the sort of lack of traction in that semantic space because of this. And so what we're trying to illustrate here is that these systems should be thought of as the databases for your AI use cases, and you have to build them. You have to invest in them. Yeah.
I just want to say, Alan, you're making a very convincing argument here. There's so much effort that has gone into keeping track of physical assets like equipment, like plants, real estate, etc. But then, you could look at companies like Coca-Cola or like major brands that they acknowledge the trademark value, the brand value, the intangible uh, properties that they have accrued goodwill against, that they borrow against. So I guess that is the argument that needs to be kind of outlined, and there needs to be further education on how intangible ideas can be translated into intangible assets that still can be used as a financial asset.
Right. Yes. Yes. And one could argue that all this work has been an expense until now, including paying people for their data. So, because it's an expense, organizations are going to go to extreme lengths to minimize that expense, right? But if we convert their mindset into one where no, we're building assets. These go on your balance sheet. These are things that we are creating that are well, if they describe your business model, and they describe how you go about making a profit, and how you incentivize people in your organization to operate as a team, these are assets. If they walked out of the business, then in theory, someone else could bolt them onto an AI and duplicate your business.
Let me make let me make a proposition here. I need to take a decision against an uncertain environment. Now, I can go buy a advisor to tell me what their opinion is. I can go buy an industry report so I can read about what is going on in the space. Or I can also buy a knowledge base or a knowledge asset that is machine interoperable that will also enhance my decision-making capabilities. These all hold different kinds of value, but they can all be reasoned to support my decision-making process. Therefore, they are valuable in their own regard. So I think that's the argument you're making here, right?
Yes. This allows us to assert to create knowledge, either as individuals or as groups, and there are many kinds of groups that can create knowledge, and assert title and ownership to it, to secure it, control it, and then monetize it without intermediaries, as a standard. Yes.
So with that, all of that in the back of our minds, I mean, one of the things that we've been able to do successfully with many large organizations is help them to go through a culture change when it comes to making data become treated like an asset of the company. And this has been a trial and error thing. A lot of organizations that we've worked with have tended to not have any deliberate organizational change management frameworks within which they've been trying to reach this goal of data on the data assets on the balance sheet. And we've seen, some real failures because of that. So, where organizations have maybe had a limited success, for a short time, and then everything goes back to the way it was in the past, and the money's being wasted, and they haven't achieved the goal. And so, we feel like with this whole idea of the smart data protocol, and with the initial adoption that we're already seeing organizations take, we're onto a much better way of implementing a change in the culture. And of course, along with it goes data literacy, the whole idea of re-educating the organization. And we've developed an approach which we'd love to be able to share with anyone who's interested to discuss in more depth how we can help them. But we were excited to be able to just share this message that we've done so far with the audience this afternoon, and would love to have the opportunity to chat in further detail. I think our contact details are available through the platform here, and more than happy to chat further. Alan, I'm not sure if you've got anything further to add.
No, y'all are perfect. Thank you. Very appreciative.
Alan and Derek, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts and the very exciting work you're doing with the Data Freedom Foundation standard, the smart data contract, and all these composite solutions being put together in a new and exciting way. I think it holds a lot of promise, and I certainly learned a lot tonight.
Fantastic. Thanks, Joaquin.
Thanks, Joaquin.